Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to be doing a complete tune-up on the Exmark Staris. The season just ended for us, so might as well go ahead and do a tune-up before winter begins and kind of store away my equipment. You can do this when the season ends. You can do this before the season starts. We're going to start out with the outside of the machine and then work our way inside towards the motor. Forgot to mention one thing. You should also check your owner's manual to see what you actually need to change out. Check the interval section and see maybe you might not even need to change your oil or your hydrostatic transmission fluid. I have 108 hours on this. The only thing I touched were the blades, and so we are gonna do it all completely for you guys in today's video. In order to change out the blades, we need something that will remove the blades. So I'm going to be using a half, well, I don't even need it, something that crazy. Let's do a 3/8 stubby, and I need a 3/4 inch impact socket. Make sure that your brake is engaged. You can even put some wheel chucks, one in the front, one in the back, just for extra safety. And let's jack it up. Now me personally, I like to remove both of my blades and then clean underneath the deck with like a little plastic or metal paint scraper. I know if you use a metal one, you gotta be careful so you don't scratch your paint. All right, look how nasty it is. And we got all this grass caked up right here. We need to remove all that. Watch, you're gonna be surprised how much grass we actually remove underneath this deck. And there you go, there's all the grass that we pulled underneath the deck. I spent about a good 10-20 minutes just scraping everything underneath, and all this grass holds moisture, and when moisture is held in one place, especially around metal, it causes rust. So that's why you see a lot of mowing decks rust out, because people don't clean underneath their decks. And it would not hurt to grab some of your blade bolts and apply some Permatex anti-seize. If you don't have anti-seize, you can use grease with an anti-seize additive, but I would recommend just going and buying some of this stuff at your local automotive store and apply it to both before you install them. A lot of people might skip this next step. I hope you don't. I hope you take some time to actually lubricate your front forks. And to do that, it almost looks like these forks are sealed up. They kind of are. They're just these dust caps on the top. They don't have their nut exposed. They kind of seal the bearing. There's one on the top, one on the bottom. Now I haven't removed them. I've never greased them. So we're gonna go ahead and kind of do it together. I'm gonna find a spot to pop this cap off. I'm gonna come in here and kind of tap in my little thin screwdriver. Once you get it going, you can kind of work it out and pop it off. Might be a little bit tough, especially if it's like seized or something. There we go, starting to lift. Now we're gonna get a bigger screwdriver and do the same thing. Kind of try to pop it off and work it off. There it goes. Okay, so here's what I was talking about. This looks like a 1/2 inch bolt, grade 8, holding the fork. So we're gonna go ahead and take that bolt off and see what our fork looks like. Okay, see the bearing came off of it, and the bearing has some surface rust all over it. We're gonna go ahead and reuse it since the bearing is still good. And there's one on the top. There's a washer and a bolt. And there's one on the top, looks like it's pretty good too. Here's the fork. Got some surface rust on it. We want to go ahead and grease it up. Make sure that it doesn't seize up. Again, you can use some anti-seize. I'm going to be using some heavy duty grease for this application. Just get a little bit on the finger and smear it around everywhere. That's good right there. Now we need to take our bearing and reinstall our bearing. And you can do that with a little light dead blow hammer or something. Sometimes it'll pop back into place, which in this case it didn't. Maybe if I take a, there we go, with the screwdriver handle, it went back in. So pretty easy stuff. Let's go ahead and reinstall our fork. Take your nut and washer and hand tighten it. I would hand tighten it all the way if you don't have access to your impact gun. And then grab your impact and just tighten it. Now we're just going to take our cap, do the same thing, just lightly tap it back. And that is so smooth. Let me see if there's a feel difference. A little bit, not too much. Again, we only have 100 hours on it. We store our equipment inside, but you might feel a difference if you do one and not the other. And if yours is really bad and seized, then this process might be a little bit more complicated for you. You can get like a wire wheel or some fine sandpaper, kind of clean up some of this surface rust. If you don't, it won't hurt a thing. I mean, I know a lot of guys would prefer to clean it off, but I'm just gonna lay some grease over it. Again, some grease that has a anti-seize additive to it. On the subject of wheels, let's go ahead and remove them from the fork using a 3/4 inch ratchet and a 3/4 inch socket with an impact. Tap that bolt out, kind of hold it in place. Look at all that, more surface rust, a little bit wet, might be from water, looks like just water, not grease, from pressure washing yesterday. And a lot of surface rust here. So we're going to clean this up and then grease it up. So we got like these bearing covers here, and they're actually metal. So you want to go ahead and clean them as well, because we will apply some grease inside of them too. Let's go ahead and just do one. That's probably too much, but a little bit of grease here, a little bit of grease on the inside of the second one, and place them right where they belong. Like that. Now take a little bit of more grease and do the bolt. And again, same thing, a little bit of surface rust. You can clean this bolt if you'd like. You don't necessarily have to, but if you want to, you can. Now, the fun part, lining everything up and installing it back onto the fork. That wasn't too bad. Take your nut and tighten it. Now you can, on some forks, over tighten where your wheel won't spin. Just make sure that your wheel spins freely, okay? I will repeat the process on the right side off camera, but if something comes up, I'll turn the camera back on. Basically finished with the front now. I highly doubt that you have air-filled tires, but if you do, and you don't have flat freeze like I do, you can go ahead and take this time to inflate your tires. You'll see the max PSI on the sidewall. Usually it's like, I don't know, 10 PSI or something. This next part I've dealt with in the past. I'm not dealing with it now, but a squeaky hood, when you open it, sometimes you get a really nasty, so we gotta fix that by adding some maybe white lithium grease or your favorite grease right in between the contact points between metals, because that's what's making the sound, is that metal to metal contact. So we'll take some white lithium. I'll probably zoom in here. You can loosen these bolts here if you'd like, but I just know this white lithium is going to penetrate through. You do not need a lot, just a tiny bit, and you'll probably hear that the sound has gone away. Now grab your grease gun, because the next thing we'll do is grease this Zerk fitting right here. This, I believe, controls this pulley arm. It's a, I guess you could call it a control arm. It also puts tension, or a tensioning arm or something like that, but it holds tension on the spring for your deck belts, so it kind of moves. And what we'll do is just shoot some grease in there. Okay, I can already feel some resistance. It's gonna shoot out. Yep, there it goes. So we got a good indication we got enough grease in there. Let me get a rag real quick, clean that up. You don't want any grease on your belts. If you do need to replace your battery, just make sure that you bring in the battery that you need along with your model and serial number of your mower. And if you go to an Exmark dealer, they will just match it up with what you bring them. You can also visually see the condition of your belt. Make sure that it doesn't have any cracks, kinks, rips in it. Mine does not have any of that, and I have not noticed any problems with it slipping off, so I know it's not stretched. Just make sure you check the condition of your belt, and if you need to replace it, I unfortunately won't be doing that in this video, but I think there might be some videos on YouTube. If not, I will definitely do a video in the coming springtime. I do recommend actually removing the wheel completely, just to make sure that everything is good, that that's not exposed to the visible eye. And what I have done is I removed my lug nuts with the 13/16 lug nut socket. It's got this plastic sleeve over it, and it doesn't damage your rims unlike what a impact socket might. So if you get an impact socket on here and you start impacting it, that metal to metal contact is going to be on your rim. So if you don't want to damage your rim, I'd highly recommend you get some lug nut sockets with those plastic sleeves. The wheel should come off no problem, as long as it's not seized, which I don't believe so. All right. And see, basically, I mean, we would never see this without the wheel off. So we can kind of inspect our hydraulic lines, make sure that there's no leaks, make sure that nothing is corroded. If we see a problem, we can go ahead and fix it now, but I see no issues at all with my wheel and my hub. So we're gonna go ahead and I will clean up this area here just because I don't like how dirty it is. I'm gonna spray some non-acid wheel and tire cleaner. You can get this at your local automotive store. Spray a little bit of it, grab a wet rag, and wipe it dry. What happens if we install this backwards? I'm just curious, man. Look how wide this rim would be. That looks pretty cool, but that's not the proper way of doing it. Don't install your wheel backwards. Install it the correct way, but I gotta point something out. If you do see any Zerk fittings, whether that be on your wheel, on your rim, on your hub, I don't know. Usually that's not the case. But if you do see any Zerk fittings, maybe you're following along with this tune-up for a different, style Exmark mower. Just check to make sure there's no Zerk fittings. If there are, go ahead and shoot some grease. Two different ways of installing this lug nut. One correct way, you want to make sure that the round end is threaded on first. So take all your lugs and thread the round one first, okay? Take your impact. You want to make sure you hand thread it on before you impact it. This next step isn't really necessary, but since I'm making the video, might as well, right? So we're gonna go ahead and torque these lug nuts down to 95 foot-pounds. That's the recommended torque for Exmark Staris lug nuts. Good there. You can also take off the jack without weight so wheel someplace. Get this one. All right, nice. Oh, that was loose. Whoa. So this is why it's a good thing to remove your wheels. We would have never seen this blob buildup of grass. I don't think it's a mice nest. Never dealt with mice with my equipment, but we're gonna take this off and throw it in the garbage. Thought I'd share with you guys this ultimate tip if you need access to your voltage regulator, which y'all know on these Exmarks, they're so compact. So much stuff everywhere, it's hard to get. Well, if you take your right wheel off, you have access to it right there. Tire inflation. You want to make sure that you input the correct amount of PSI in your tires. In my case, on these tires, it says 22 PSI. Check your sidewall and see what that number is, what your max PSI is for a tire pressure. Actually, before I inflate, let me check to make sure we're not overfilling. Do it again. Don't go off your first reading. We're at about 14, so it needs a little bit of air in these tires. Doesn't take much. Easy to overinflate. Do it until you have the correct PSI. That's why I think the brake was also not engaging well, because we had an incorrect amount of pressure in our tires. I think we're at 22 there. And a little bit more than we should. That's good right there. Curious, let's see. Yeah, see, this one was more inflated. So this one's closer to 18. Just need a little bit in this one. Tad bit more and we're done. I'm not even gonna check it. I know it's good. Since we're here, let's also go ahead and check our wheel hub nut and make sure it is torqued to 135 foot-pounds. Let's see where we're at. Good there. Good. If you are replacing your fuel filter, you just have to remove these clamps. You can use some pliers, take this clamp here, slide it all the way back, take the one behind it, slide it all the way back. But do keep in mind of the flow of your fuel. It'll indicate it on the fuel filter. If it doesn't ask, if you don't see the indication when you buy the fuel filter from your dealer, it sometimes doesn't matter, but if it does, and it doesn't have an arrow, ask them to maybe indicate it for you with a Sharpie or something like that. When I worked as a small engine mechanic, I would work on customers' lawnmowers, and some of those customers never listened to me. They would use low quality fuel, 85, 87, and 85 is not recommended. So I know it's cheap, I know it's a lot less, but guys, pay that premium price and use a good grade fuel in your lawnmower and your small engine, whatever it might be, but run clean ethanol-free fuel. If you don't, I'd recommend you buy some seafoam to treat your fuel system. Now, again, I run ethanol-free, but still does not hurt to add some seafoam to your fuel system. Some might say this is snake oil. I mean, look at all of the things it indicates that it will do when you apply it to your fuel system. The hydrostatic transmission fluid change. Let's go ahead and do that. You want to make sure you check your level first, just to kind of get a good indication of what's going on and what went on during operations for the season. And you want to check your levels when it is cold, not when your system is hot, because it will give you a false indication if you check it while your machine is hot. So you want to give it about 12, 24 hours for your whole system to kind of cool down, and then check your levels. So never go off your first reading, but as you can see, we're sitting pretty well. And the soil is pretty clean. It's only got 100 hours on it, but we, for the purpose of this video, are going to replace it. This right side shroud needs to come off, and I'm using a T30 Torx bit to remove it. I also have a zip tie. Let me get that first. That's for my OCDC. I just decided to zip tie that right over there. Now let's take off our hardware. Someone decided to start mowing as I'm making this video. Anyways, we won't let that stop us. We need to remove the hydro oil filter. And as you can see, this kind of catch directional piece of metal, it's going to drain all of the oil down here, whatever's under there. Now, it doesn't really stick out far, so I'm going to take a little funnel. Then I also have a catch pan underneath the funnel, so that way it doesn't drain onto my floor. Usually you can take and remove these by hand. As you can see, I really just turned it. Now again, I have never changed my hydrostatic transmission fluid or the oil filter, so if you had this taken to a shop, they might over tighten it, but this is probably gonna make a big mess, so I'm gonna do this quick. Oh boy. All right, well, made a little bit of a mess, but that's okay. We'll let that drain. It's been about a couple minutes now. It's still draining. As you can see, there's the stream there. I did end up putting the pan under. It looks like the stream kind of sits a long ways and my pan fits underneath the deck. So it's still coming out. I'm just gonna let it roll, do its thing. We basically got all of the oil out. It's just dripping just a tad bit. That is okay. What we wanna do is just go ahead and install the oil filter, but we wanna pre-fill it first, at least about halfway with our hydro oil. Since it is vertical, you can honestly do it all the way. All right, we filled it. Now, kind of take our finger with some of that oil and apply it around the ring, the O-ring. Now we'll take our filter and install it. Thread it on by hand, of course. And you want to thread it on until it meets contact with the metal surface. All right, it's met contact. Now from that point on, you just want to turn it about 3/4 turn. So we'll just kind of use this as an indication and find it 3/4 of the way. Kind of hard with an oily oil filter. So we'll take a rag and let that rag assist us with our turning. And even that's slipping. Gotta love it. All right, we are just about there. There we go. Now we need to fill the reservoir or the whole system with 2 quarts of oil. And this is very crucial. You want to make sure that you clean off anything that might go inside of that tank. Get a very clean funnel, rinse it out, not rinse it out, but clean it. Make sure there are no contaminants so you don't contaminate your system. It is a lot easier to fill this reservoir with a funnel. If you don't have a funnel, you might have to take off the pad, which is held on by 2 bolts. And again, here is the hydro oil we're using. It's the original Exmark hydro oil. So we got about 2/3 of this bottle emptied, and I started to notice that it was getting full and actually started to leak out. We still need to use up this bottle because we don't have the 2 quarts that we need. So what we're gonna do is loosen the oil filter. And we're just going to allow a little bit of oil to come out of the oil filter. And just so it kind of bleeds out the system. Okay, that's about halfway. I loosened it a bit more to speed up the process. And you can already tell the level has gone down. You might be able to hear air coming out of it. Maybe, maybe not. And there goes that little bit of oil starting to drip. So we're gonna go ahead and tighten it up again. Now we actually have to run the machine a bit to kind of get the oil through all of the lines so we don't get a false reading. The oil level is pretty high, so even if we check it right now, it's going to be super high up the dipstick. Very incorrect reading. So what we will do is raise up the back of the machine. Again, put your wheel chokes in the front and raise up the back to where the back wheels are raised off of the ground. We'll start the machine, put the levers in forward and forward position and full speed to the front and allow kind of the oil to run through the whole hydraulic system. Just right where the wheels clear the ground. Just make sure they both clear by hand. Yep. Make sure when you do start it that you move both levers with the correct amount of pressure, okay? And we want to run our machine for about 1 minute with equal amounts of pressure in the forward position. Both wheels should be spinning. If they don't, we might have to prime our hydro gears. We'll get into that if we do run into that issue. So go ahead, start up, run it for 1 minute. I don't have a watch on me, but I'm just gonna count from 60 and then shut it off, let it cool a bit, and we're gonna check our oil levels, okay? It's been 1 minute, just checking for leaks, making sure everything's tight. And now we let the system cool off a bit. While we wait for the hydraulic system to cool, we can go ahead and change our oil. We'll take this rear guard off. Now never go off the first reading. Go ahead, lightly thread it back in. Take it out and see what your oil level's at. So our oil level is about halfway. It's about halfway, not too bad. We need to loosen up the drain here, this hex bolt. I think that might be 3/8 or a 10 millimeter. Once we do that, oil will start to drain from the bottom here. And there is a little guard. It's easier to see it on this left side. You take the knob and you unscrew it. And then this pan will come right off. That pan kind of gets in our way when we try to drain the oil. pan. And now we can put a oil drip pan under here. I noticed that the only way I can get my drip pan is through where we had it originally. You just keep on sliding it back. You can't insert it from the left side because you have a scalp wheel. I guess depending on how tall your drip pan is, maybe some can, but if you do have an oil catch or oil filter placement holder, you can place it up here in the opening. Just make sure that that is, if the oil pan is underneath this opening here, that's where a lot of the oil is going to come out. We want to drain the oil from here, from the engine first, and then we'll take off the oil filter. Got myself a 10mm socket on a battery ratchet, and it doesn't take much to loosen it up. Once you do, you'll see oil start to come out. You don't need to remove it all the way. To kind of speed things up, I did go ahead and lift the front end. And it is almost done. Actually, before you drain it completely, please, I implore you, take the key out and put it somewhere in one of your drawers. So that way, if someone pulls you off the job and you don't remember what you did, you don't go and try to start the machine with no oil in it. I tried to remove this oil filter by hand. Again, I've never replaced it. So it's just, I guess, pre-tight from factory. What we'll do is we'll remove it with an oil filter socket. And you can use an oil filter strap, oil filter plier, whatever you have will work. Now, it's got a little lip on the engine itself. I don't know if camera I'll zoom in here so you can see that lip is going to direct all of the oil into your pan. So don't remove it completely. Just loosen up the oil filter to where you have a good stream of oil coming out of it and let that drain as well. Now once it's drained, you got this little pocket. You can go ahead and set that oil filter if you have one of those oil filter holder pins, and it'll drain the oil filter for you. Now, we got to clean up this compartment before we reinstall our new oil filter. I want to make sure it's clean, no oil anywhere. Make sure your rag is clean as well. We want to pre-fill it as well. Now this one, definitely you want to fill it at about halfway. Don't fill it up all the way. Since it is mounted sideways like that, you'll end up with a leaking oil filter. You don't want that. So fill it about halfway. Take your finger, make sure it's clean, make sure your glove is clean, and just put some oil over the ring. And awesome, we didn't make a mess. So that means we didn't add too much. If you notice some resistance, please do not continue threading. Make sure it is correct. So once it does touch, you want to do that 3/4 turn. So my O-ring has touched, so we'll use this Kawasaki eye as an indicator. We want to go about halfway. All right, that's as tight as it'll go with my hand. Take my wrench. And move it a little bit more. If you go 3/4, it's okay. That's what I'll be doing instead of half. There we go. I see that eye on the top, so we went about 3/4. You of course want to close the oil drain plug. You don't want to over tighten this either. Just make sure it's tight. You don't got to go crazy with it. Take the pump jack out. Go get your funnel. Make sure your funnel is clean. Since we did use the same funnel for hydraulic oil, you want to run a rag all the way through it. Make sure it is clean and dry. Now again, we're pouring the whole quart in it first. Make sure that is not coming out of the top of the dipstick. Make sure there is some airflow between the dipstick and your funnel. So that way you get a smooth pour. Grab our second quart here. And after we fill our second quart, we want to make sure that the oil filter isn't leaking, and we will kind of let it settle and check our oil level. I think we need about 2.5 quarts. That's what the dealer told me. So I know the next process should be to start the machine, let it run for a little bit, get the engine hot, and kill it, and then check your engine oil level again and make sure your levels are correct, make sure there's no leaks. Well, I don't know if that will make the pumps start to work. I know they work off of the drive system, but I don't want them to get hot because we still haven't checked the level of our hydro oil. But what I'm already seeing is I've let these pumps cool for a while now, and I believe that we added too much. So we are sitting way above the lines, so all the way up to this black part here. So instead of removing the hydro oil filter to drain some, I'm just going to siphon some out and suck them out with my pneumatic oil extractor. You can use like a turkey baster if you want. And it's very critical that you make sure there's absolutely no debris if you are using a turkey baster or something or an extractor of some sort. You want to make sure it's super duper clean. Check our level again. That's more like it. So let me get it on camera here. Right there, right where it's a little bit dry, as you saw. Why the dealer suggested 2 full quarts, which we only needed about 1, is because there's more than likely oil in these reservoirs already. So we didn't need 2, but I did like 1.5, and that was way overkill. So we actually removed probably 1/2 quart. We technically only needed to do 1. Let's fire it up, let it run for a minute, and then check our engine oil. Hey, key's gone. I wonder why. All right, we'll let it cool down for a sec. Wipe it dry. And we are pretty good. And don't forget to install the pan back. And if you're wondering where it hooks onto, see those golden bolts right there? You have one there and one on the other side. It's kind of hard to see, but they hook on to those bolts. Okay, you got one there, one on this side. Hook them on, and then you should be able to line up this knob bolt and thread it back on. And don't forget about the side panel. Okay, next is the spark plugs. You will need a 13/16 socket, spark plug socket preferred. If you don't have a spark plug socket or something thin enough, I know the impact sockets get a little bit thick on the walls. You can use a lug nut socket. That's what we'll be doing. Since I don't know where my spark plug sockets went, but as you can see, I removed my fuel tank because it was so hard to reach this spark plug boot here. It's easy to reach. This one is just right underneath the shield. You have access to it. But this one, I could not get a spark plug I could not get a spark plug socket on there. You might try, you might kind of get frustrated. So I just thought it'd be easier to just remove the tank. I took off the return line, fuel line, and then I loosened up the 2 nuts underneath, and that came off of the little holder here. And then I twisted it about 90 degrees and removed it off of the pin. So I'll show you my reinstall, so maybe that'll help, but I'm gonna go ahead and change out the spark plugs. Just again, using a 13/16. Here's the old one, NGK BPR4ES. Not too bad. Here's the new one, direct replacement, NGK BPR4ES. Reinstalling the fuel tank. Just want to find that opening with your, I found it with my middle finger. Place it in and bring it inside like that. Make sure that none of the cables are being pinched off. Make sure none of the fuel lines are being pinched. Make sure that any electrical wiring that you ran isn't pinched. You don't need to do anything more on the left side. You just want to connect your fuel line back on. Open up your fuel tank. Let's kind of let all the pressure out. And then your return line. And now you have this rod that kind of holds the tank in place to the frame. And you have the two nuts under it. Those two nuts have to be tightened up. And you can do that with a 9/16 ratcheting wrench. Don't forget about the other spark plug. Now this one we probably should have done before we installed the shield, but it's okay. We'll just go over it instead of using an extension to remove it. All right, so again, not too bad. 100 hours on the spark plug, so that's pretty good. Go ahead and install the new one. You want to make sure that there is no buildup behind this engine shroud cover. It's metal. If there is, you want to lift it up and blow everything underneath, because there's like a fan under there, and you can get some grass buildup underneath this engine shroud cover. I feel like this is taking longer than it should, but that's just the case when you go and do an in-depth tune-up on a machine. So there we are. Dirty pre-filter, dirty air filter. We're not even gonna clean them. We got new ones. We just need to remove this clamp. Once we got the clamp loose, it should pop straight up and off. Look, take a peek inside. Not too bad. I have blown out this air filter and pre-filter a few times. You can kind of clean up this area if you'd like, blow it out, do whatever you need to. I'm just gonna give it a quick wipe down. I don't want it wet, I just want it clean. And this hose, if it comes off, it comes up, hooks up right there. All right, go ahead and get this air filter out of the package. And same with this pre-filter. Slide it over and in and tighten up. Whew. I'm tired. This thing wiped me out. I'm gonna go home and rest. Hey, I am home. I do my own mechanic work. I don't work in a shop, and so taking your machine to a dealer, imagine how much time they're going to charge you in the labor costs of tuning up your machine completely the way I did it. So I hope this video encourages you to do your own tune-up on the Exmark Staris. I have another Toro multi-force that I'll be doing an in-depth tune-up on it as well, so stay tuned for that. In the meantime, take care, guys. Thank you so much for watching. God bless you. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to leave them in the comments down below. I will try my best to answer them. In the meantime, again, thank you so much. Take care. God bless you. And we'll see you in the next one.